When I opened that casket and saw the wedding ring inscribed with my name on a dead woman's finger, I knew my entire marriage had been built on a lie. The man I'd shared a bed with for 5 years wasn't just hiding his past, he was hiding someone else's entire life. It was supposed to be a simple funeral. My husband David's distant cousin had died unexpectedly, and he seemed unusually shaken about it. "Skip it," he kept saying, his hands trembling as he sipped his morning coffee. "You didn't know her. It'll just be depressing." But something in his voice, that desperate edge I'd never heard before, made every instinct in my body scream that he was lying. When David gets nervous, he does this thing where he touches his wedding ring and spins it around his finger. He was practically wearing a groove in it that morning. I should have listened to him. But curiosity killed more than just the cat that day. It killed everything I thought I knew about the man I married. Let me paint you a picture of our life before that Tuesday in October turned everything upside down. David and I had what everyone called the perfect marriage. We met at a coffee shop in downtown Portland 5 years ago. One of those meet-cute stories that made our friends roll their eyes and ask us to tell it again at dinner parties. He was this charming guy with kind eyes and a laugh that could fill a room. Worked in tech, had a small but comfortable apartment, drove a reliable Honda Civic. Nothing flashy, nothing suspicious. Just normal, safe. Everything my previous relationships hadn't been. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony in my parents' backyard. David didn't have much family, claimed his parents died in a car accident when he was 22, and he was an only child. It made me want to protect him even more, to give him the family he'd lost. Our life together was comfortable. We had routines: Saturday morning farmers market, Sunday afternoon hikes, Tuesday movie nights. David was attentive but not clingy, funny but not overbearing. He remembered anniversaries and brought me flowers on random Wednesdays just because. But looking back now, there were tiny cracks in the perfect picture. He never talked about his childhood in detail. No old friends ever called. He paid for everything in cash and got visibly uncomfortable when I suggested we get a joint bank account. "I like keeping things simple," he'd say, deflecting with that million-dollar smile. I thought I was married to David Chen, a software developer who loved hiking and made the world's best pancakes. Instead, I was living with a stranger who had somehow stolen another woman's life and made me an unwitting accomplice. The morning of October 15th started like any other, with David kissing me goodbye as he left for work. By that evening, I would discover that everything, literally everything about him was a lie. The phone call came at 7:23 a.m. on a Tuesday. I remember because I was making David's coffee, 2 sugars, splash of cream, and the kitchen clock was right in my line of sight when his phone buzzed on the counter. "Unknown number," I called out to him as he emerged from the shower, hair still dripping. The color drained from his face when he saw the screen. Not just surprise, pure, unadulterated terror. His hands actually shook as he answered it. "Hello?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Then a long pause where I could hear someone talking rapidly on the other end, though I couldn't make out the words. "When?" Another pause. "No, no, Okay. Okay, I understand." When he hung up, David just stood there staring at his phone like it might explode. I'd never seen him look so broken, like someone had just told him the world was ending. "Baby, what's wrong?" I reached for him, but he flinched away from my touch. That should have been my first real warning. "My cousin Rebecca died," he said, the words coming out mechanical and flat. "Car accident yesterday night. The funeral's Thursday." I'd never heard him mention a Rebecca. In 5 years of marriage, he'd never mentioned any cousins. But grief makes people do strange things, right? Maybe she was someone he'd lost touch with, someone from the family he rarely talked about. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I tried to hug him again, and this time he let me, but his body was rigid against mine. Where's the funeral? Do you want me to come with you? That's when he grabbed my shoulders and looked me straight in the eyes with an intensity that made my stomach drop. Number absolutely not. You didn't know her, Sarah. It'll just be. It'll be really sad and depressing, and there's no point in both of us being miserable. Skip the funeral. Trust me on this one. The way he said trust me, like he was begging, like his life depended on it, sent ice down my spine. David had never, not once in our entire relationship, told me not to come somewhere with him. He included me in everything, sometimes to an annoying degree. I watched him get ready for work that morning, and it was like watching a stranger wearing my husband's face. He kept checking his phone, jumping at every little sound. When he kissed me goodbye, his lips were cold. The rational part of my brain said to respect his wishes, to let him grieve privately. But the part of me that had learned to trust my instincts, usually the part I ignored, was screaming that something was very, very wrong. To understand why finding that ring destroyed me so completely, you need to know what David meant to me. What I thought he meant to me. Before David, I had a pattern of falling for the wrong guys. The charming ones who turned possessive. The funny ones who used humor to mask cruelty. The confident ones who were actually narcissists. My dating history read like a cautionary tale about red flags and ignored intuition. My sister Emma used to joke that I had a broken picker, that I was magnetically attracted to men who would eventually hurt me. After my ex-boyfriend Marcus cheated on me with my roommate and then tried to gaslight me into believing I was imagining things, I took a 2-year break from dating entirely. I was working on myself, going to therapy, learning to trust my own instincts again. I'd started believing that maybe I was better off alone, that at least I couldn't be betrayed by someone I wasn't letting close. Then David literally ran into me outside Powell's Books, knocking my coffee all over my new white sweater. Instead of apologizing and walking away like most people would, he insisted on buying me a new sweater and taking me to lunch to make up for it. "I'm not usually this clumsy," he said with that sheepish grin. "You must have really caught my attention." What won me over wasn't just his looks or charm, it was how safe he felt. David never raised his voice, never made me feel stupid for asking questions, never tried to control what I wore or who I spent time with. He was the anti-Marcus in every possible way. When he proposed 18 months later, he did it during one of our Sunday hikes. Nothing elaborate or public, just him, me, and a simple solitaire ring overlooking the Columbia River Gorge. "I don't need anything fancy," he said as he got down on one knee. "I just need you." The ring was exactly what I would have chosen for myself if I'd gone shopping alone. White gold band, classic setting, not too big, but not too small. When I asked him how he knew my taste so perfectly, he laughed and said he'd been paying attention. Our wedding was small, but perfect. My parents adored him. Finally, their daughter had found someone who treated her well. Emma gave a maid of honor speech about how happy she was that I'd finally found one of the good ones. Even my normally skeptical grandmother pulled me aside to say David had kind eyes and that I should hold on to this one. I thought I'd learned to recognize the signs of deception, thought I'd developed an early warning system for men who weren't what they seemed. David passed every test, cleared every hurdle my trust issues put in his path. The cruel irony is that David was too good to be true. I just never imagined that the reason was because he literally wasn't true at all. I tried to let it go. I really did. For exactly 36 hours after that phone call, I told myself I was being paranoid, that grief affects people differently, that I should trust my husband's wishes and stay home. But David's behavior only got stranger. He barely ate dinner Tuesday night, kept checking his phone every few minutes, and when I tried to ask about Rebecca, just normal questions like how old she was or where she lived, he gave me vague, contradictory answers. She was around our age, he said at first. Then later, actually, she was quite a bit older, like mid-40s. When I asked where she lived, he said Seattle, then corrected himself and said Spokane, then got irritated and said, "Does it matter? She's dead, Sarah." Wednesday night, he couldn't sleep. I woke up at 2 a.m. to find him sitting on the edge of the bed, head in his hands, shoulders shaking. When I asked what was wrong, he just said he was processing and went to sleep on the couch. Thursday morning, the day of the funeral, he was up before dawn. I found him in the kitchen at 5:30 a.m., fully dressed in a black suit I'd never seen before, staring blankly at his untouched coffee. "You sure you don't want me to come?" I asked one more time, studying his pale, drawn face. The look he gave me was almost panicked. "Please, Sarah, please just trust me on this. Stay home. Watch Netflix. Order takeout. Just please don't come." After he left, I sat in our kitchen for 2 hours, my mind racing. Every instinct I'd developed through years of therapy and hard-won self-awareness was telling me that something was catastrophically wrong. This wasn't grief. This was terror. I tried calling my sister Emma, but she was in meetings all morning. I considered calling my mom, but what would I say? "Hi, Mom. I think my husband is lying about a dead relative, but I have absolutely no evidence." Finally, I did what any millennial would do. I turned to Google. I searched Rebecca Chen car accident Seattle and found nothing. Same with Spokane. I tried different spellings, different combinations of words. Nothing. I expanded the search to include the entire Pacific Northwest. Still nothing. Then I got creative. I searched for recent car accident fatalities involving women in their 30s and 40s. Nothing matched David's timeline or location details. By noon, I'd convinced myself there was no Rebecca Chen who had died in a car accident earlier this week, which meant either David was lying about how she died, lying about her name, or lying about her existence entirely. I called his office. "Hi, this is Sarah Chen, David's wife. I'm so sorry to bother you, but I know he's at a funeral today, and I forgot to ask him what time he'll be back. Do you happen to know which funeral home?" His assistant, Kelly, was happy to help. "Oh yes, he said he'd be at Morrison's funeral home on Burnside until around 4. Such a sad situation with his cousin." Morrison's funeral home. A real place with a real address. Whatever David was hiding, it was happening there. I sat in my car outside Morrison's for 20 minutes, hands shaking on the steering wheel, having a full-blown argument with myself. This was crazy. I was violating his privacy, disrespecting his grief, acting like the paranoid wife in a bad thriller movie. But then I thought about that look in his eyes when he begged me not to come. That wasn't the look of a grieving man who wanted to mourn privately. That was the look of a man who was terrified of being caught. I walked into Morrison's at 2:17 p.m. and asked the funeral director about services for Rebecca Chen. "Oh, you mean Rebecca Martinez," she said kindly. "The viewing is in Chapel 2. Are you family?" Martinez, not Chen. My husband had given me a fake last name for his supposedly dead cousin. I followed the signs to Chapel 2, my heart hammering so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. I had no idea that I was about to discover that the man I'd been sleeping next to for 5 years was wearing a dead woman's identity like a costume. Chapel 2 was nearly empty, just a handful of people scattered across the pews, and David sitting in the front row, his shoulders hunched forward like he was trying to make himself invisible. I slipped into a pew in the back, my hands trembling as I tried to process what I was seeing. The woman in the casket was definitely not David's cousin. She was maybe 45, with dark hair and olive skin, wearing a simple black dress and my wedding ring. She was wearing my exact wedding ring on her left hand. Not similar, not the same style, identical, down to the tiny scratch on the band that I'd gotten when I caught it on a fence during one of our hikes. I must have made some kind of sound, a gasp or a whimper, because David's head snapped around and his eyes locked on mine across the chapel. The look on his face wasn't surprise or embarrassment. It was pure, animal terror. He shot up from his seat and walked toward me with quick, desperate steps. "Sarah, what are you doing here? I told you." "She's wearing my ring," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "David, she's wearing my exact wedding ring. How is that possible?" He grabbed my arm and tried to pull me toward the exit. "Let's talk about this outside. This isn't the place." "No." I yanked my arm free and walked toward the casket. "Who is she, David? And don't you dare tell me she's your cousin Rebecca." The funeral director appeared beside us, looking concerned. "Is everything all right? Are you family members?" "I'm Rebecca's brother," David said, his voice cracking on the lie. The woman looked confused. "But I thought you said you were her husband when you made the arrangements yesterday." The bottom dropped out of my world. Husband. David had identified himself as this woman's husband when he arranged her funeral. "Excuse me," I said to the funeral director, my voice somehow steady despite feeling like I might collapse. "Could you tell me what name this service is under? I think there might be some confusion." "Rebecca Martinez," she replied, though the gentleman here also mentioned she sometimes went by Rebecca Chen. Chen, my married name, the name I'd taken when I married David. This dead woman had been using my name. I turned to face David, and what I saw in his eyes confirmed every horrible suspicion that was crashing through my mind. Guilt, fear, and underneath it all, resignation. "Who are you?" I asked him, my voice barely above a whisper. "Who the hell are you really?" He looked around the chapel at the few other mourners, then back at me. "Not here, Sarah. Please, let me explain, but not here." "No." I was surprised by the steel in my own voice. "Right here, right now. Who is Rebecca Martinez and why is she wearing my ring and using my name?" David's whole body sagged like someone had cut his strings. When he spoke, his voice was flat and defeated. "She was my wife. My real wife. Rebecca Martinez Chen was her legal name after we got married. She died 3 days ago in a car accident, and I couldn't let anyone know we were still married because that would mean—" He trailed off, unable to finish. "That would mean what, David?" He looked at me with hollow, broken eyes. "That would mean my marriage to you isn't legal. It never was." The chapel spun around me as the full weight of his confession hit. I wasn't David Chen's wife. I never had been. I was just the other woman who didn't know she was the other woman. I don't remember leaving the funeral home. I don't remember the drive home or walking through our front door. The next clear memory I have is sitting on our couch, his couch, apparently, at 6 p.m. that evening, staring at the walls of what I now realized had never actually been my home. David sat across from me, his head in his hands, and told me everything. Rebecca Martinez wasn't just his wife, she was his first wife, married when they were both 23 and stupid, and thought love could conquer any obstacle, including the small obstacle of David already being married to someone else. His real name wasn't David Chen, it was Danny Volkov, and he'd been running from a criminal family in Chicago for 8 years. Rebecca knew the truth when she married him, but she got tired of the constant moves, the fake names, the looking over their shoulders. She left him 2 years ago, but they never got divorced. "I thought she was gone for good," he said, his voice hoarse from crying. "I thought I could start over, be someone different, Someone better. When I met you, Sarah, it felt like a second chance. So you lied about everything. It wasn't a question. Not about loving you. That was real. Everything between us was real. I laughed, but it came out bitter and broken. How can you say that? Our entire relationship is built on lies. You're not even who you say you are. We're not legally married. I don't know the first true thing about you. He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. You know that I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. You know that these 5 years with you have been the happiest of my life. You know that I would die before I let anyone hurt you. But you already hurt me, I whispered. You hurt me worse than anyone ever has. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, he spoke again. Rebecca called me 3 days ago. She was in an accident, and they called me because I was still listed as her emergency contact. She died en route to the hospital. The doctors told me she'd been asking for me, that she wanted to reconcile. So you were going to leave me for her? No, he said quickly. I don't know. I was so confused, Sarah. I thought she was out of my life forever. And suddenly she was back. And then she was gone again. And I realized that legally, our marriage never ended. Which means I'm nobody to you, I finished. Legally speaking, I'm just some woman you've been living with. David, Danny, whoever he was, reached for me, but I flinched away. You're everything to me. You're the only good thing I've ever done with my life. I stood up, my legs shaky but determined. I need you to leave. Tonight. I need you to pack your things and get out of my sight while I figure out what I'm going to do with this information. Sarah, please. Your name isn't David. You're not my husband. This isn't your house because we were never legally married, which means you have no claim to anything we built together. So pack your things and get out. He started to argue, then seemed to realize he had no ground to stand on. An hour later, I watched through the window as he loaded his suitcases into his Honda and drove away into the October darkness. I spent that first night alone in my house, surrounded by the remnants of a life that had apparently never existed, wondering how someone could live such a convincing lie for so long. It's been 6 months since that day at Morrison's funeral home, and I'm still unpacking all the ways David's deception affected me. Not just the obvious betrayal, but the subtle ways it changed how I see myself, how I trust my own judgment, how I move through the world. The practical stuff was easier to deal with than the emotional fallout. Since we were never legally married, untangling our lives was more straightforward than a divorce would have been. The house was mine. I'd bought it before we met and never added his name to the deed. Thank God for small favors. I kept the name Chen, though. Not because I wanted any connection to him, but because Sarah Chen is who I've been for 5 years. Changing it back felt like letting him steal even more of my identity than he already had. The hardest part has been learning to trust myself again. For weeks after he left, I questioned every decision, every instinct, every feeling. If I could be so completely wrong about the person I shared my bed with for 5 years, how could I trust myself about anything? Therapy helped. My therapist, Dr. Rodriguez, pointed out that my instincts about David had actually been correct. I had sensed something was off that morning he got the phone call. I had known he was lying about the funeral. I had trusted my gut enough to investigate despite his protests. Your radar wasn't broken, she told me. You just ignored it because you wanted so badly to believe you'd found something real. The truth is, parts of David were real. The way he made pancakes on Sunday mornings, the way he listened when I talked about my bad days at work, the way he held me during thunderstorms because he knew they made me anxious. That wasn't performed. That was genuine. But it was genuine affection from someone who fundamentally betrayed me by building our entire relationship on a foundation of lies. Love without honesty isn't really love at all. It's just very convincing pretending. I haven't heard from him since that night he left. I don't know if Danny Volkov went back to Chicago to face whatever he was running from, or if he created another new identity somewhere else. Part of me hopes he found peace, but mostly, I hope I never see him again. What I've learned is that betrayal doesn't always look like cheating or cruelty or obvious red flags. Sometimes it looks like the most loving, attentive partner you've ever had, who just happens to be lying about every single fundamental thing about themselves. So here's what I keep wondering. Did I handle this right? Should I have tried harder to understand his position, to forgive someone who clearly loved me but had been trapped in an impossible situation? Or was I right to cut him out completely the moment I discovered the deception? Part of me wonders if I was too harsh. David, Danny, whoever he really was, he seemed genuinely devastated by Rebecca's death and genuinely terrified of losing me. Maybe if I'd been more compassionate, more willing to work through the legal complications, we could have found a way to build something real from the ashes of all those lies. But the bigger part of me knows that trust, once shattered this completely, can never be fully repaired. How do you rebuild a relationship when you discover your partner has been lying about their name, their past, their legal status, and their availability for marriage? Where do you even start? I need your perspective. Was I justified in ending things immediately, or did I give up on someone who genuinely loved me but made some terrible choices? Have any of you dealt with discovering that someone close to you had been living a completely different life? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm still trying to figure out if I made the right choice, or if I let fear drive away the best relationship I ever had, even if it was built on lies. Thank you for reading my story. Your support means everything.